What up, YouTube? Welcome back to another video. We're going to be talking about our American blacks, the descendants of Jewish people. So it's been a lot in the news in the last few months about Kyrie Irving and Kanye West. And I want to talk about a little bit of their statements if the blacks are truly the descendants of, people of Israel or the Jew or from the kingdom of Judah. I'm not going to go into everything that they said, but yeah, I think we can actually find some historical evidence that some of those statements are true. Um, and this is just plain information on the internet. Nothing that's really going to be uh, in my own personal library per se, but this is just an article. When we talk about the Jews that were deported from Spain in 1492, we know them as the Sephardic Jews, right? So I'm going to read this article and then we're going to read some other things to kind of get some clarification on the subject. So the expulsion of Jews from Spain was the expulsion from Spain following the Alhambra Decree in 1492, which was enacted in order to eliminate their influence on Spain's largest converso population and to ensure its members did not revert to Judaism. The conversos, they were the Jews who converted to Catholicism, but they were in a sense they were still kind of secretly practicing their religion. All right, so they didn't want their influence on that population. So many Jews in Spain either converted or were expelled. Over half of Spain's Jews had converted to Catholicism as a result of the massacre in 1391. And that was a result because, in the late 1300s, that's when we got the bubonic plague, or AKA the Black Death, where this disease started to spread it across Europe that was attributed to rats, but really it was attributed to body lice of the wild men who were treading across Europe, and they were spreading that disease, but people didn't know where it was coming from, so they actually used the Jews as a scapegoat. Now we know at this time the so-called Jews were so-called black people. So that these massacres were religious wars, but they also were race wars at the same time. So just to put that in context. So let me read that sentence again. Over half of Spain's Jews had converted to Catholicism as a result of the massacre in 1391. Due to continuing attacks, around 50,000 had converted by 1415. Those who remained decided to convert. Those who remain decided to convert to avoid expulsion. As a result of the Alhambra Decree and the prior persecution, over 200,000 Jews converted to Catholicism. Between 40,000 and 100,000 were expelled, so they're kicked out. An unknown number returned to Spain in the following years. The resulting expulsion led to a mass migration of Jews from Spain to Italy, Greece, Turkey, and the Mediterranean basin. So these are the people that we would call Sephardic Jews today. But they weren't just in that area. They also went to the west coast of Africa, and I'm going to prove that. All right. So at the time, this can be seen in Jewish surnames beginning to show up in Italy and Greece. The surnames Faragi, Farag, Faraci, for example, originate from the Spanish city of Faraga. All right. So let's clarify these statements. This is a book called The Invention of the White Race, Volume 2. And this is this is page 26. I'm just going to read this one paragraph right here. It says the single instance in which this basic plantation labor needs were supplied from the Iberian population, that's Spain, Portugal, Iberia, that's Spain and Portugal, occurred in 1493. When did, the deportation, expulsion of these Jews happened in 1492. So now this is 1493. In that year, 2,000 Jewish children 8 years old and younger were taken from their parents, baptized as Christians, and shipped to the newly founded Portuguese island sugar colony of Sao Tome. And that's translated as St. Thomas in English, where fewer than 1/3 were to be counted 13 years later. All right. So I just wanted to highlight that because that's very important. We're going to get into that too. So let's look that up. Let's see where is that place. Let's go back here. Let's just look it up. Sao Tome. All right. Let's see right here. Let's actually go on the map. Check it out. So it's an island. Where's this island? This island's on the west coast of Africa. Y'all see, I'm not making this up, right? All right. So south of Nigeria, west of the Congo, Guinea, you have this island right here. All right, called Sao Tome. All right, so let's go into the Wikipedia article on this country. All right, so the history of this country. Alvaro Caminha founded the colony of Sao Tome in 1493. The Portuguese came to Sao Tome in search of land to grow sugarcane. The island was uninhabited before the arrival of the Portuguese sometime around 1470. Sao Tome, situated about 40 kilometers north of the equator, had a climate wet enough to grow sugarcane in wild abundance. 2,000 Jewish children 8 years old and under were taken from the Iberian Peninsula for work on the sugar plantations. The nearby African kingdom of Congo eventually became a source of slave labor as well. The island of Sao Tome was the main center of sugar production in the 16th century. It was overtaken by Brazil by 1600. So, as you see, these 2,000 Jewish children, these were the Negroes that were eventually put into the American slave trade or the transatlantic slave trade. All right, going back into that story or that book. So it says like here, right here, I didn't mention this, but when they went to the newly founded sugar colony, Sao Tome, where fewer than 1/3 were to be counted 13 years later. So 13 years later, the 2,000 children that were sent here, only 1/3 of them survived 13 years later. And they intermixed with the population. They were sold into slavery into the New World. All right. But that's Sao Tome. Now, we're going to get into a little deeper. This is a book called America. Basically, it's a book about the early New World. It was written in 1671. So it talks about the New World, the Americas and the Caribbean islands, South America and all that. This is about going to clarify some things that was hidden in history. You know, these books were written before the 1800s, and before the 1800s, a lot of history was just written accurately. But after that, it started to change. So this is a good source to know. This book is actually a good source to know about a lot of history that was kind of lost in the Caribbean islands and Americas. But so this is page 574. This is Portuguese that dwelt on this island. This Old English, so the F is S. The Portuguese that dwelt on this island and formed the Netherlands. They're talking about St. Thomas. That few lived above 50 years there. Yet, notwithstanding the great gain tempted them to tarry, several of them having 200 or 300 Negroes that worked in the sugar mills, that John III, King of Portugal, sent a colony thither above 200 years before, whom through the unwholesome air destroyed. So the weather was really rough for them. So it got destroyed, that colony, 200 years before. Yet the place was not left desolate, for he sent new inhabitants who first settled in Guinea, next in Angola, and lastly on the island St. Thomas. That's what we call Sao Tome in Portuguese or Spanish. That's so they might be the better used to the air, right? That the said king sold all those Jews for slaves that refused to embrace the Roman religion. Then we just read that those people who refused to convert to Catholicism, they were either killed or they were deported, right? And caused their children to be baptized, from whom coming thither in great numbers, most of the present inhabitants were descended. So these people that this book admits that these people that lived on that island and in these areas, they were the descendants of those children who were deported from Portugal, who were the Jews, what we would call Sephardic Jews, but they were the original Jews of Spain and Portugal. And that's why when you read about history in Europe, you talk about the religious wars, when you talk about the Jews and the Catholics and the Protestants, we have to remember this was also a racial war at the same time, where they were basically having an ethnic cleansing of Europe. So yeah. So to answer the question in the beginning, do so-called Black people, have the ancestry of Jews? And yes, not all of them, not all of us have, but there's quite a number of us who do descend from these people. All right. So, I just want to point that out. Some people may disagree. I don't really care. I'm just showing you, information that's out there, and you can look it up for yourself. All right. Peace.